Welcome everyone to the second session of Relax and Grow, our BSWA meditation retreat for one day. So we were talking about renunciation, and I would like to give you a bit more information today before we do another meditation together. So this morning here in Western Australia, I'd like to talk about where is it here? The benefits of renunciation and the drawbacks of worldly pleasures. So we are basically continuing from what we were discussing yesterday. So if you missed that, that should now be available on YouTube for you to watch at your own time. Another sutta I like very much. It's in the Majjhima Nikaya. It's number 82, and it's the Ratthapala Sutta. It's a very, very long sutta actually, and it's a bit like a movie, or it's a very elaborate story. And of course, we don't have time to go through the whole thing here today, but I would like to highlight one specific part of this beautiful sutta. It talks about Ratthapala, who became a monk, and after becoming a monk, he was meditating as the monks would do. You get your meal from the village, you eat your meal, and then after your meal you have the whole afternoon and the whole evening to yourselves, so you can seek seclusion and meditate. And Ratthapala went into the Deer's Range Park of King Kuravya, and King Kuravya came to see him on that occasion. So that is a conversation of those two people there. So King Kuravya is asking Venerable Ratthapala, what did you know or see or hear that made you go forth, Master Ratthapala? So what made you renounce? So again, now we are talking about the renunciation of becoming a monastic. That is, if you go the whole way. But of course, as a monastic, there is still a lot of renouncing to be done as well. But these principles that we will be talking about are not just for monastics, they are for anybody. So we are starting to realize what the drawbacks are of the world and the worldly pleasures, and what we should be developing instead. So what did Ratthapala have to say? Great King, the Blessed One who knows and sees, the Perfect One, the fully awakened Buddha, has taught these 4 summaries of the teaching for recitation. It was after knowing and seeing and hearing these that I went forth from the lay life to homelessness. So Ratthapala is now saying, I have heard the Buddha teach those 4 summaries, and those 4 summaries have convinced me to actually become a monastic, to renounce the world, as they say, to go from lay life into homelessness. So it must be something very powerful. What are those 4? Number 1, the world is unstable and swept away. Number 2, the world has no shelter and no savior. Number 3, the world has no owner. You must leave it all behind and pass on. Number 4, the world is wanting, insatiable, the slave of craving. So that is the summary there of those 4 points. And now we will go into more detail there to have a look at it together. And also King Kuravya was interested what they're all about. The world is unstable and swept away. So Master Ratthapala said, how should I see the meaning of this statement? The king asks. What do you think, great king? When you were 20 or 25 years of age, were you proficient at riding elephants, horses, and chariots, and at archery and swordmanship? Were you strong in thigh and arm, capable and battle-hardened? And the king says, I was, Master Rajapala. Sometimes it seems as if I had superpowers then. I don't see anyone who could have equaled me in strength. So that is very often what happens. So we take what our bodies are able to do for granted, and it almost seems like a superpower sometimes, especially when we are still young. What do you think, great king? These days, are you just as strong in thigh and arm, capable and battle-hardened? And the king is very honest here. He says, no, Master Ratapala, for now I'm old, elderly and senior. I'm advanced in years and have reached the final stage of life. I'm 80 years old. So he realizes there is a very big distinction between how he felt when he was young and how he feels now when he is older. But of course, you don't have to be 80 years old. We're all getting on in life. You're always getting older. You're not getting younger. And you're starting to realize that so many things that you have taken for granted within your body and within your mind, your brain as well, that they are starting to deteriorate. So the king says, sometimes I intend to step in one place, but my foot goes somewhere else. Cute how this king is describing old age there. So your body doesn't really behave. It doesn't do exactly what you want it to do. So even if you're young, that is not going to be the case. But the older you get, the more the system gets worn. And it's the same even if we buy new shiny things. Very, very often, very, very quickly, they are not new and shiny anymore. So impermanence is working there. This is what the Buddha was referring to when he said the world is unstable and swept away. So there is no stability and things are starting to deteriorate from day to day, from year to year. It's incredible, Master Ratapala. It's amazing how well said this was by the Buddha. For the world is indeed unstable and swept away. So that was an explanation of the first summary there. The second one, in this royal court, you can find divisions of elephants, cavalry, chariots, and infantry. They will serve to defend us from any threats. Yet, you said the world has no shelter and no savior. How should I see the meaning of this statement? So, of course, this king is very wealthy and he has a lot of people at his disposal, a lot of animals, a lot of things. So we are not kings, but we still have so many things in place that we hold on to and that we feel are giving us safety, shelter, and which can save us. To a certain degree, of course, they make our lives comfortable, but can they really give us ultimate shelter or act as an ultimate savior? Let's see what the sutta has to say. What do you think, great King Ratapala says? Do you have any chronic ailments? And the king, again, very honest here. Yes, I do. Sometimes my friends and colleagues, relatives and family members surround me thinking, now the king will die. Now the king will die. So sometimes we experience some of those sicknesses or illnesses, even if they're not chronic, that might be quite strong. And we actually feel quite a bit of pain, quite a bit of discomfort. And that is something normal. So if we don't experience those things, then we should actually be wondering. Life has sickness as part of it. It's part of the course. So we will experience it every now and then. And sometimes quite severe. Sometimes we even develop some chronic things. What do you think, great king? Can you get your friends and colleagues, relatives and family members to help? Please, my dear friends and colleagues, relatives and family members, all of you here, share my pain so that I may feel less pain. Or must you alone feel that pain? The king reflects and says, I can't get my friends to share my pain. Rather, I alone must feel it. So, of course, this is not saying that it doesn't help if someone is there who is feeling with you, who is understanding, who is connecting with you on a mental level. Of course, that helps. But we live in our own bodies. We live with our own minds. And the savior, is something which has to come from within. It can't be grasped, it can't be pulled in from the outside. And if there is pain, of course, we can take painkillers and things like that, but there is a limit to all these things. We can't really escape it. And so we have to learn, as we were talking about it yesterday, to relate to those things in a different way, in a wholesome way, so we don't add more pain to the pain that is already there. So this is what the Buddha was referring to when he said the world has no teacher and no savior. In the end, we are by ourselves. We are with this body and this mind when it comes down to it. When we are sick, when we are on our deathbed, when we are passing from this existence to another existence. It's incredible, Master Ratapala. It's amazing how well said this was by the Buddha. For the world indeed has no shelter and no savior. So the king understands the second summary here as well. Third summary. In this royal court, you can find abundant gold coins and bullions stored in dungeons and towers. Yet you said, the world has no owner. You must leave it all behind and pass on. How should I see the meaning of this statement? So now we start to talk about all the things, about all the possessions that we have in this world. Again, it's important to have enough so that we can live easily, comfortably, so that we can survive basically, but not just survive, but live in a way which is comfortable enough. But very often we go beyond that and we think that the things in this world can give us more than they actually can. So how can this be understood? What do you think, great king? These days you amuse yourself, supplied and provided with the 5 kinds of sense stimulation. So this, again, is talking about the 5 senses, not the mind, but the 5 external senses and the objects of those senses that give us some pleasure, that give us the worldly pleasure. But is there any way to ensure that in the next life you will continue to amuse yourself in the same way? So now we're moving beyond this life to make the point here. And the king answers to these questions. Oh, sorry, there's another question. Or will others make use of the property that you have now while you pass on according to your deeds? So in Buddhism, we believe in reincarnation, that this life is going on. So we will pass away from this existence. We take our mind and the imprints into this mind with us, the conditioning basically, but the things from this world, they will stay in this world. And the king realizes there's no way to ensure that I will continue to amuse myself in the same way, the king says. Rather, others will take over this property while I pass on according to my deeds. So we are reflecting about passing away here. Sometimes it's a bit difficult to reflect on these things, but please bear with me. And we are reflecting about these things in a way that encourages us to let go and to unburden ourselves and to have freedom from these things, to have good feelings arise. If there is negativity that arises, if there is fear that arises, then we are contemplating these things in an unskillful way. So let's see that we can look at it from the right perspective here. It shouldn't be negative, it should be just a reflection about how things actually are and what we can rely on and what we can't rely on. So at the end of the life, these things pass on, but even during our lifetime, so many of the possessions we have, they change hands, they deteriorate, they disappear, they are given away, they are lost. So we shouldn't invest too much into all those things. And then the king says, here we go. Whoops, this is what the Buddha was referring to. Sorry, that's Ratapala speaking. This is what the Buddha was referring to when he said, the world has no owner. You must leave it all behind and pass on. So it's all nature, and we are part of nature. Even though we sometimes think that we are controlling nature, there is actually not that much control that we can wield. And the more we try, the more we push, the more we grasp, the harder and the unhappier we actually very often become. The more frustrated we become in the process as well. Good, so that is this one. It's incredible, Master Ratapala. It's amazing how well said this was by the Buddha. For the world indeed has no owner. You must leave it all behind and pass on, the king says, and hopefully understands what this is all about. You also said this, the world is wanting, insatiable, the slave of craving. And I think this is a very good point here that we should reflect upon very carefully. So how should I see the meaning of this statement, the king asks. And Ratapala answers in the following way with a question again. What do you think, great king? Did you dwell in the prosperous land of Kuru? So the king had all this land to himself. He was the owner of this land, the king of this land. And he said, yes, indeed, I do have this land and it belongs to me and I reign over it. What do you think, great king? Suppose a trustworthy and reliable man were to come from the east. He'd approach you and say, please, sir, you should know this. I come from the east. There I saw a large country and that is successful and prosperous and full of people. They have many divisions of elephants, cavalry, chariots, and infantry. They also there is plenty of money and grain, plenty of gold, coins, bullions, both worked and unworked, and plenty of women for the taking, and plenty of men, of course. It's a bit man-centered, very often the suttas as they're written. With your current forces, you can conquer it. Conquer it, great king. What would you do? So even though the king already has a country that he is the king of and reigning over, if there comes an opportunity and they tell him there is more you can get, he doesn't really, he isn't really satisfied with what he already has. So there isn't that contentment that we were talking about. So he would say, yes, of course, I would conquer this other country that I heard about, and I would dwell there as well. Now, suppose there was a trustworthy and reliable man who were to come and say that there is this same kind of country in the west, the north, the south, or even over the ocean with all those beautiful things in it. And he approach you and say exactly the same thing that he said before. And he would ask, what would you do? And again, even though the king has his own country, has another country that was to the north, I think it was, and he says, well, of course, I would conquer it. I would dwell there. So there we see this unsatiability that comes with possessions and with worldly pleasures so often if we're not careful. This is what the Buddha was referring to when he said the world is wanting. It's insatiable, the slave of craving. And it was after knowing and seeing and hearing this that I went forth from the lay life to homelessness, Ratapala says. And the king understands. It's incredible, Master Ratapala. It's amazing how well said this was by the Buddha. For the world is indeed wanting, insatiable, the slave of craving. And this last part there, the slave of craving, actually shows you that we very often think that we are the master, that we have those possessions and that we have control over the possessions that we have, and that we have control over our cravings as well. But if we are mindful, we start to realize that at a certain point, these things actually start to control our lives. They start to take over our lives, and we get into habit loops and we behave in patterns that we don't really have that much control over anymore. And they unfortunately lead us into the wrong direction there. So these are the four. The world is insatiable and swept away, impermanence. The world has no shelter and no savior. So we are thrown back at ourselves. We have to do the work. We have to understand. We have to become peaceful within ourselves. The world has no owner. You must leave all behind and pass on. So all the things that we own, at best, they are borrowed goods. We take good care of them. We share them with other people. But we realize and make sure that we don't define ourselves by the things we have, but grow the inner spiritual qualities instead. And we understand the world is wanting, insatiable, and the slave of craving. So we can never really get enough. The other very strong simile that often is cited in the suttas is about drinking water that has salt in it. So we are trying to quench our thirst, but instead of quenching it, very often we are making the problem worse. And also one other simile that I wish to mention here, which is a very nice one, is the simile of the dog that the Buddha uses in a couple of places, where he says it's like the dog who comes to the butcher's place, and the butcher throws him a bone, but the bone is cut clean. So it's pretty much just a bone with a little bit of blood, but there is no meat on this bone. And the dog gets really excited and start eating or like licking that bone, and he gets a bit of a taste of the meat that was on that bone before, but it never really satisfies the dog. It doesn't really nourish the dog. There is just bone and blood. And the more we are starting to realize that this is the same with so many worldly pleasures. They have a little bit of blood, they have a little bit of a substance there which attracts us, but it doesn't really give us the sustenance that other things can. Okay, so that's Majjhima Nikaya 82 for you. And that leads us to the Dhammapada. So now please understand these things, as I said before, these are reflections. These are reflections to give us an understanding of the drawbacks, so we can take a step back, we can start to renounce those things, start to let go of these things, start to get a bit of perspective towards those things, and then we are starting to turn around and fill ourselves with things that actually have substance, that can support us, can feed us, can maintain us in a much more sustainable way. And that's what Dhammapada verse 204 is about. Let me just take a sip of tea here. And it goes as follows. If by renouncing a lesser happiness, one may realize a greater happiness, let the wise renounce the lesser, having regard for the greater. And I do recall that very vividly when I went to India for the first time and became a monk there. Acharya Buddha Rakkhita, who was my preceptor at the time, was telling me, please understand, there are worldly pleasures to be had in this existence, but there are spiritual inner pleasures to be had in this world. Please choose wisely. And of course, if we don't know, as I explained yesterday, if we don't know the spiritual, the inner pleasures well enough, then we can't really compare. But that's what a meditation retreat, what the Dhamma and the practice is all about, to get to know our minds, to get to know our hearts and the beautiful qualities that can grow and start to emerge when we give them space and nourishment. So even in the world, we now have a movement from shifting from the worldly values to those spiritual or inner values. And that's the quote I found here from Shed Balki, I hope I said the name right, which is an entrepreneur. So I don't really think a Buddhist, but he says here, happiness is the new rich. Inner peace is the new success. Health is the new wealth. And kindness is the new cool. So what we are trying to achieve, what we're trying to do is to change the value system that we have around, to value the things who truly intrinsically have value. So riches, success, wealth in terms of money, or being cool, being, looked at by other people as being the bee's knees or whatever, are all those things that don't really last, that don't really support you in a substantial way. But happiness, inner peace, health, and kindness are principles and values that when we develop them, then they will stay within ourselves. It's something we grow within ourselves, and it's something we take with us from place to place, wherever we go, when we travel in this world, when we go and meet different people, but also when we go from life to life. Now, this is a modern person, this is a modern quote, but of course, the Buddha has talked about these things in many different ways. And for example, in Dhammapada verse 204, the Buddha said pretty much the same, almost. Let's have a look. He said, health is the ultimate blessing, is the ultimate gain. So, of course, we take care of our body, we take care of our mind. Our body is our vehicle in this existence, and so we care for it. And that basically means to, sleep the right amount, eat food that is good for your body. Don't stress your body out. Make sure that it basically gets what it needs to function. So it's okay to take care of your body. We can go overboard, but very often we are actually a bit too austere in meditation circles. So that's why in meditation we always take care of our body first of all, which is important. And that improves our health and our well-being. Then contentment is the ultimate wealth. So instead of having lots of money in your bank account, instead of having lots of possessions just in case at home, we practice contentment, we practice simplicity. We are happy with whatever we have. So often we really crave for something, we really want to have something. And then once we have it, instead of enjoying it, instead of being happy and content with what we have, we start looking for the next thing in the future. So please realize that a lot of things that you have now and that you are maybe not even content with anymore were the things you were craving for in the past. And if you are not careful, this craving, driving feeling just drives you out and away from the present moment. So come back to the present moment, come back to being grateful and content with whatever you have. Next one, trust is the ultimate family. Trust, confidence, commitment, faith in the teaching, faith in your own abilities, faith in your own heart, that is what you can ultimately trust. That is something like your family. I think family there is just a word that is used as a simile here. Of course, hopefully we can trust our family. These are the people who are close to us. But trust is something, again, here also, which is internal. So it's something you grow within yourself. You're trusting yourself. You're trusting the Dhamma. You're trusting the process of and the teachings of the Buddha. And then extinguishment. That's the translation that Ajahn Sujata uses there. Fading away, the disappearing. So nibbana, the going out, nibbana basically means is the ultimate happiness, is the ultimate bliss. And you don't have to take the Buddha's word for it. You can experience these things by yourself. The more you let go, the more you let go in the right way, with a right, open, unlimited heart, then you will start to experience this happiness and this bliss for yourself, step by step. Okay, in the presence of Nibbana. That's from one of the talks that Ajahn Brahm gave in the past, which basically carries on from what we were talking about here. Allow the mind just to get concentrated. And now Ajahn Brahm doesn't use that word anymore. So that's why you can see it was taught in the past. So that's why I put the word focused and collected there, in there. So allow the mind just to get focused and collected, to revert to what we might call its natural state, stillness of mind, the seeking of satisfaction and comfort within itself rather than outside. So this is the spiritual path. This is the inner path. We are turning things around. So instead of seeking outside, we start to seek, to get to know, and to develop the inside, the heart. And he carries on. The mind then becomes self-sufficient, self-comforting, self-sustaining, so that the door from the mind to the 5 external senses is cut off in meditation. And the mind does not go out to the 5 senses. Instead, it remains immersed in itself, in a radiant joy. So that is what happens in the meditation process if we do it slowly, carefully, and step by step, as we were talking about it yesterday. We establish our mindfulness within this body, and then within this body on the breath, which is a body and object as well, and then let it go deeper and deeper. Let the 5 senses fade away and immerse ourselves in this joy that arises. And that's what the Buddha talked about in the sutta that we looked up yesterday. So you might remember from other talks that I gave, Pakandati, Pasidati, Santitati, and Vimuchati. So leap forward, grow confident, settle, and I use the word be freed here for Vimuchati. So Vimutti is freedom. So we spring forward, we jump onto. Now, these are the spiritual inner joys and pleasures that start to arise. So that's what we spring towards, that's what we jump onto. So of course we have to start to get to know these things in meditation. That's why it takes practice. But once you get to know these things, then your mind knows that it is sustaining, that it's happy, that it is great, basically, to be in a place like that. And it will very naturally spring forward and jump onto that pleasant object. So that is the tricky thing here. Very often with worldly pleasures, we think we have to chase after them and force our way in meditation. this is something which happens very, very gently and very, very naturally. And then once we have done that, then we become bright, pleased, purified, clear, and devoted. So you might have already noticed with your meditation from yesterday and this morning that your senses, your mindfulness starts, or actually your mindfulness starts to increase. And because your mindfulness starts to increase, everything becomes bright, purified, and clear. So even if you're moving around in day-to-day life with a peaceful, mindful heart, then you start to see whatever you're seeing much, much more clearly, and it is much, much more entertaining. So the boredom, which always is there with a little bit of pushing away, with a little bit of not wanting, starts to dissipate all by itself. Foods start to become more tasty, like my breakfast. I had simple oats, but you can taste them so much more. You can see the color so much more. And then the same thing applies in meditation. You can see the body and the sensation, the movement so much clearer and with a joy and happiness at the same time. And that is what makes us remain, become fixed, settled, and start to stand, sit still, to calm down, basically. The mindfulness and the happiness that arises is what makes our minds and hearts stable. And then, if that has been done in the right way, we start to become freed of the five senses. We become freed of all those things that tie us down, that weigh us down, that make things difficult, so to speak. So we get connected with those beautiful things, we get grounded, and then once we are grounded, remember the simile we had of this sheer cliff that we come to. So we sit down, we let go, we connect to the beautiful things, to the inner things that start to arise. And once we are properly grounded, once we are happy and at ease, once we can really trust this process, then we gently start to lift off, so to speak, to float and to fly. And then we can cross that dividing line, then we can cross that threshold. But it's not the body that is crossing this. So we don't have to be afraid that, we are moving towards this abyss. We're moving into the unknown. We're moving into the air. We are doing this with the mind. The body is safely sitting where we sat down before, but because we learn to let go of the body, then we can just let it sit there and go within and let ourselves be carried into the mental world. What I have next here. So sometimes this process can happen a bit too quickly, and we don't have enough strength or enough oomph to go into this process. And then we need this uplifting energy to make sure that the mind can actually take off, float, and fly. And the Buddha recommends that we use certain reflections here. So we either reflect on the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. If you are familiar with these terms, if these terms are close to your heart and they mean something to you, then it's very easy. If they don't, you have to start to reflect on them in a certain way that they start to give you this uplift and this energy. So the Buddha is the enlightenment principle. He is the teacher who has realized all these things and who is sharing these things openly with us. So he went, as you saw yesterday, through all these different stages himself and discovered this path and is now sharing this path. So he is a reflection of the enlightenment principle that is in this world, that is in everyone's heart, and that can be developed and grown. The Dhamma is the way he has explained, shown, and taught what he has realized himself. So that can be very inspiring to reflect about that. And then the Sangha, of course, are, strictly speaking, in this sense, the people who have walked on this path of enlightenment, who have realized stages on this path, and are therefore exemplars of this path. They are radiating what this path achieves in your life. And that can be very, very inspiring. So we do have beings in this world with us. So it's not just the Buddha from the past and his teachings, which are beautiful themselves, but there is actually people who are walking this path. And then you reflect, please, please, that is so important, to reflect on your own virtue, to reflect on the virtue in the world, fair enough, that can give you happiness and joy as well, but do reflect on your own virtues, on the renunciation that you're now practicing for this whole day with this retreat that we do together. And once you reflect about this good quality, your mind gets uplifted. Reflect about giving, about being charitable, about giving a piece of yourself, giving time, as we talked about before, chaga. So you're renouncing, you are gifting something to someone else. What a beautiful thing that is. And then you can reflect on that to uplift, to make your mind powerful and joyful. And then you can think about devas as well. These are the heavenly beings who have very pure mind states. So we can reflect on those beings, but we can also reflect that when we have mind states that are similar to the mind states of those beings, or we can reflect that if we are virtuous, if we are giving, we are basically leaning in that direction. We are moving in that direction. And if we have a pure heart and a pure mind, that pure heart and that pure mind will be reborn in a plane such as the Deva plane. So that can also be something to inspire ourselves, to energize ourselves. And in other suttas, the Buddha sometimes talks about, when there is suffering, instead of getting caught up in that suffering, you reflect again on the teachings and you realize that those teachings give you a way out. And that is what inspires faith in you, what inspires confidence, what inspires commitment. And that will help you to get joyful. And joy is crucial on the Buddhist path. So you can't meditate negatively. That's what Ayakema used to say. If you have if you have a small mind, as we talked about before yesterday, then meditation just can't take off because there isn't enough mindfulness and happiness. So joy is important. So learn to kindle this joy in your meditation. The spiritual, the inner joy that we are maybe not so used to kindle within our hearts. And then once that joy has been kindled, rapture arises. That is piti. And rapture is, again, important. It's a certain bubbliness that comes. It can be physical, but it can also be mental. And that bubbliness of the mind, that energizing of the mind that comes from a pure inner spiritual joy is what produces tranquility. And the tranquility here is the tranquility of the body. So because you are happy, you have rapture, you are contented, that's why your body becomes tranquil. You can't make your body tranquil. The tranquility happens because the energy and the joy is there. So that's what we have to cultivate, what we have to grow. From that comes pleasure. And this is the pleasure, like in the world, you get pleasure from achieving something, from getting something. And here it's the joy and the rapture, the tranquility of the body. And because that is there, because the relaxation happens, there is a pleasure that comes with this feeling of letting go and of relaxation. And this pleasure will lead you to stillness. Again, these are stepping stones that are leading us forward in this path. And stillness, of course, here is the word samadhi, is the word for meditation, for collectedness of the mind, for stability of the mind. And that's what we are aiming at. So let's make sure, again, we take it step by step and we rouse this joy, rapture, tranquility, and pleasure, which leads us to stillness. And then in turn, sometimes in the suttas it stops here, but sometimes it carries on. And from that stillness, we get clarity of mind, we get balance of mind, and then knowledge and vision can arise. Then insights start to arise because the mind and the heart is in the right place. And from there, we get disenchantment and dispassion. So we have found something much more valuable, much deeper. So we connect with that and we let go of the things that are not as helpful as we thought. And that can lead us all the way to liberation there. Okay, one last thing I wanted to mention. This is actually a prayer of a Christian holy man from Switzerland. His name is Brother Klaus, and he lived as a hermit in a little valley in Switzerland. I actually went to a school quite close to this valley when I was in secondary school. And now he is using the word God, but if we replace for us, for our understanding, because Buddhism doesn't, believe in a God, by the word Dhamma, by the word principle, by the word law, then we can understand what this whole process is about. And that's what we've been talking about. So his prayer is very wonderful. It has 3 parts. It starts with, "My Lord and my God, take everything from me that keeps me from thee." So from what we've been talking about, take all those things that are burning me down, that are keeping me away from this beautiful principle of the Dhamma, of the teaching. Take that from me so that I can be close to thee. Next one. "My Lord and my God, give everything to me that brings me near to thee." So these are the beautiful inner spiritual qualities that I was talking about. This joy that arises, this happiness that arises, that leads us into the right direction there. And then, of course, there is a third one, and the third one is the most powerful one here. "My Lord and my God, take me away from myself and give me completely to thee." And that is what is starting to happen in the meditation process here. Bit by bit, we are giving ourselves what we think to be ourselves. The possessions, the thoughts, the things we cling to, they start to fade, fade, and fade. And we give ourselves completely to this beautiful process of the Dhamma, this beautiful process of meditation. And there you can see that is basically the picture again. And now you start to understand, hopefully as well, why I chose this picture. So we come to this point where there is a big cliff because we are transiting from one world to the other world. And I'm just seeing the clock there. Sorry, I won't have time to guide a meditation this time because we do have the interview groups coming up afterwards, but I'll just try to describe what you can, if you wish, do in the meditation process for yourself afterwards. So you collect yourself, you bring mindfulness to your body, you bring mindfulness to your sensations, you let those things fade away, the worldly things fade away, and see if you can start to fly in this hot air balloon there that is on the picture. If you can start to arouse this joy, this happiness, either through reflection, the reflections that we talked about, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, your own virtue, the giving, the devas, the faith you have in the process, or just feeling the beautiful joys that arise by this process of meditating, being peaceful, letting go of things, and then let that grow and become stronger and stronger. So that is like the hot air that fills the hot air balloon. And then you can start to lift off and fly into this beautiful mental inner world of meditation. And the other thing I really like about this picture here is you can see the balloon is actually starting to disintegrate. And that is the case. So the process of meditation is we are becoming less and less the deeper we go into this process. And the joy and the happiness and the wakefulness and the bliss is becoming stronger and stronger as we give ourselves, as we trust this process and let ourselves be taken by it, carried by it.